Okay, so when we looked at this idea of biodiversity, we talked about the concept that you have any given space, whatever that space is, you have any number of individuals in that space, and it's not, you don't just want all one species or clones of those individuals in that space, because it weakens the ability of that population to survive. And so in other words, if all of these are just monoclonal, for instance, one single type of grass that comes from one parent gene, if they're all clones, right? Then any disease that comes into the population could cause massive issues in that population, could wipe out the population. Presently, birds are going through a massive die-out because of a virus known as H1N3, I think it is. Don't quote me on that.
Is that the bird flu?
It is a version of the bird flu, yes. H1N1, long before COVID, H1N1 was an issue because the issue with birds is, of course, we eat them. And when you eat them and you keep them in any population in close quarters, whether it be plants or animals or bacteria, when they're in close quarters, there's a high population density. You have an increased risk of disease. So when you have a high population density, you have a high increased risk of disease. And that's what's been happening with birds. It started with the Chinese goose farm where this latest version of a Chinese goose farm, the latest version of this H1N1 this bird flu virus started, and it spread pretty much everywhere right now, all around the world. Now I want you to take a minute with the person to your right and to your left, just three of you. Pick your group. If you're on your own, you just think by yourself. Consider why Chinese? Why is it that the flu generally starts in China? Consider all the things we just said over the last couple minutes. Think on it, discuss it, and in 2 minutes I'll ask you for your opinions.
was gonna ask this question. But if you want me to get real hypothetical, why would there look, you know, like after World War, the states had this 71 war, and they let everyone know that they accepted that bioterrorism with the Japanese. So they did global experiments that like biochemistry. They injected like syphilis and all that stuff. And you know, once they lost America, they were not the people that were doing that, but they had offered to trade the result of the experiments for their freedoms, and that's why America, you know, it's the first really to focus more on large scale some guys at the Soviets and second all the spies. So maybe like the global no, not like there could be a false flag. I'm making stuff up. But I mean, the non-false flag.
Okay, let's hear what some ideas are. Somebody go ahead. Go ahead.
So me and my group are basically thinking, since it mainly always happens in China, we thought it's because it's like the places
Where I wouldn't say it always happens,
Well, not
always
always,
starts, maybe.
We thought it mainly starts there because the place is very isolated and it's kind of like the equivalent to a chicken coop where there's like no separation and diseases spread a lot there because there's just so much isolation and stuff.
All right. Anybody else?
Owen would like to go.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Me and my group thought of the possibility of high population density in China and lower regulative standards in like manufacturing and production. Could be one. Lower sanitary standards, as well as of course population density.
All right. Sounds. I like. Listen to what. Go ahead and say that again.
There's a lot of exotic animal markets located in China because that's like the norm there.
Did you all hear what she said? And do you think that these? All right.
That box.
So when we look, yes, all that, everything I heard is there are some reasonable points made. So China, why do flus tend to start in China is because of the population density. There's a lot of people living very closely to one another, and that's not good for disease control. Okay. On top of that, someone mentioned that there's an exotic animal market. They eat a lot of meat, but not just one type of meat, not industrial farming, right? We talked about the problems with industrial farming. But the one good thing about industrial farming is if there's a good thing about industrial farming, is that they do try to control disease and they're able to identify it. There's some responsibility because there's a corporation, you can trace the source of the meat and all that. But in China, a lot of the markets are fairly diversified, and the exotic market can be as crazy as rhinoceros horn. Like people will, in order to save the rhinoceros, It's in some markets, some people in China believe that it makes a man more potent. So they literally pay a lot for a rhinoceros horn. So you have to kill a rhinoceros, which are endangered, to get the horn. So in Africa, what they've gotten to the point where what the caretakers will do is they'll cut the horn off the rhinoceros to reduce the idea that they have to kill they'll kill the rhinoceros for their horn. But that's not the only exotic animal that they use. They use geese for food. They'll raise all kinds of animals that we wouldn't consider as a food source. They would raise them as food, and they live in high density. This is a picture of a goose farm in China. 6,000 geese on a farm in Jiangsu province, China. And they're waterfowl. So they're living on a lake or a pond. What are they doing in that lake or pond? Peeing and pooping and drinking and eating. And if one gets a virus, how quickly do you think the rest will get the virus? Pretty cool, and pretty quickly. And what do birds do?
Poop on people's shirts.
Interesting. Birds fly, or at least a lot of birds fly. So it's, by the way, it's H5N1, not H1N1. It's N3. It's as I said, I wasn't clear, but it said in the article. I knew I couldn't remember what it was, but it's the virus is H5N1 is the virus they're talking about here. And the article talks about it as being frightening, and it is. It's a frightening, killing a massive number of birds. Scientists have never seen anything like this. This article is dated yesterday. Okay, this bird died in Peru. The virus started in China. These birds died in Peru.
That spread real fast.
All right. So, I have a map. Give me a second. I thought I brought it in. So if we look at the map, sure you're all sick of graphs. So one of the things you're going to need to do for your project, I was going to do it in class, but obviously you're going to have to do this for homework. You're doing the project as well. That's your classwork, dude. In case you're confused about that. This is the poultry. Poultry is turkey and chicken. We use it for food. What do you know about industrial farming of chicken and to make our chicken nuggets and our turkey meals? What do you know about them in America? To pack them in tight spaces, high population densities. So shouldn't be a surprise that a bird that flies in from China, and they do cross the oceans, that they fly in from China and spread it to other birds, that we would see a spread of this virus in America, right? And these are the density. These are the affected poultry. You see the red, these blue, these kind of teal are wild birds that have been identified, confirmed having the virus. The purple are suspected. So that's 3,000. Every blue dot here, every big blue dot, is 3,000 wild birds. Every purple dot's 3,000 suspected. So we have a lot. It's covering America. And the poultry that's affected is 3.25 million. As you can see, every state, including Ohio, is at the 3.25 million measure of chickens and turkeys. Our food source has been impacted. So this is serious business, and H5N1 does cross over to humans, and in fact, that's how the first bird flu epidemic happened. It never became a pandemic. We're not worried. Scientists yet are not worried about this virus turning into a COVID situation, because we have vaccines we've stockpiled vaccines for H1N1 and the H5N1. So we have vaccines for it. So it's not like COVID where we had to spend a year and a half trying to find a vaccine for COVID. That was tough. We have a vaccine. What's the problem with a vaccine? Yeah.
Could maybe the virus could develop resistance to it?
This is really a good point. And we don't say it that way though. The virus could mutate. The viruses don't develop resistance. We develop resistance to the virus. The virus is just a DNA or RNA molecule inside a protein coat, sometimes a lipid coat. It doesn't have an immune system. It doesn't react to its environment. It just replicates. It's a piece of bad code that just keeps making copies of itself. It doesn't even make copies of itself. We make the copies for them. Does that make sense? That's why a lot of scientists don't consider it alive. It's just a particle. Some scientists do though. It's a big argument. They're still going back and forth. Huh? Yeah, go ahead.
Because since there's the live virus in the vaccine, well, technically, there's a live virus in the vaccine that could cause it to get you sick.
I guess there is no live virus in any vaccine. Today, most attenuated viruses are no longer used, although some are still used. Attenuated means that you boil it. Remember, it's not alive, never was alive. But you boil it to a point where it's broken up into, where it's weakened, and then you inject that weakened vaccine into someone. What we do today, before the COVID vaccine, is we injected you with the protein from this outer surface of the virus. We made the protein in bacterial cells through transcription and translation, and we injected you with the protein. And that, of course, it made you immune to the virus because it's your body's reaction to the protein coat that is your immune reaction. The COVID vaccine used RNA. And so the idea with the COVID vaccine is it works better because then we inject you with RNA, which is not DNA, right? And you have very limited, if any, ability to make RNA into DNA. Is that clear? So it's not going to be sent from one cell to the other. It's not going to be, it's incredibly safe when it comes to a vaccine. We inject your cells with the RNA. RNA is taken into your cells, and what do we do with RNA? What do we do with RNA? It's just after the OST. What do you do with RNA? What happens? Ribosome, I heard, is correct. It goes to ribosome, yeah, and makes it into a protein. Correct. So you make the protein. So they inject you with the RNA to the protein coat. Could you take that earbud out of your ear, please? And she can't hear me because she's listening to her show or her music. Is that what's going on? Take your earbud out of your ear. Stop listening to shows or listening to music while we're in class. I know it's still a shocker at the end of your 9th grade year, but it really should not be happening. Yes. So RNA, in the COVID vaccine, they inject you with RNA, and then your body makes the protein. And then your body reacts to that protein. You learn that this is the dangerous protein in this way. Really safe. It's been proven with COVID vaccines. Millions of people have been vaccinated, incredibly safe vaccination. Yeah.
I think you might have already answered this, but like when you get vaccinated, for example, by COVID, why do most people like get sick from it? Because when I got it,
Everybody gets sick. You're supposed to get sick when you get a vaccination. If you don't get sick, you're not. What is sickness? What's it when you get? Describe the symptoms of illness? Yeah. Anybody?
Like your body
Fever?
too cold or overheating.
Not weakened. It's actually it's the response. Your immune system's response is what you call ill.
When your body-
So fever. What else? Fatigue. Shivers. Sore throat. Soreness. Right. Swelling. This is your body's response to an invader. Illness, what you call being ill, is your body's response to an invader. The problem is, if the invader wins, you lose, which means you die. And the other problem is the reaction itself can cause death, like an allergic reaction. The peanuts could kill you, right? That's your body's reaction to an invader. It's an immune reaction. What you call I feel sick is your body reacting to something, whether it's allergies or it's an invader. But what's the problem with vaccines? With the fact we have the vaccine that could stop this from happening to us, making people sick and turning this into a COVID issue, why is that a problem?
Did you not give it to like the birds and stuff?
I'm not sure if they could give it to birds. Birds' immune systems are different from humans. Yeah. Mutation is a big issue. If we allow it to, if it keeps happening, it used to be H1N1, now this is H5N1. It could be H6N3 or something. I don't know. And that, I'm not sure what the number designations mean, but I'm assuming it's the next generation of the virus. That mutation could be something we don't have a vaccine for, correct? However, the good news is that when viruses mutate, they generally mutate in a way that we could quickly get another vaccine for it, as long as we have a vaccine for the previous version, because it's generally just a small change. It's not a radical change. And so because it's a small change, we can use what we had before and then change the DNA to match the change in the protein. And then when we make the protein, inject you with the protein, the vaccine works. So as long as we understand the virus, we've sequenced it, it's much easier to keep up with it with the mutations. But regardless, that's not the biggest problem. What's the biggest problem with vaccines? People not taking them. If we choose, and we do have a right to choose, you have a right in this country to choose not to take the vaccine, it could be a problem. COVID lasted as long as it did in America, and this over 1 million people died in America because people chose not to take the vaccine, not to follow these population controls, congregations, people getting together. In fact, we have 2 people out with COVID today, don't we? Yeah, 2 teachers, right?
Oh.
It's no one's business. But we have 2 people are out, right? So when you look at what's happening, what people look at is, I'm not sick. So what do I care? Or COVID's not a big deal. I got COVID, I know because I did a test, and it wasn't a big deal. What's the problem with that thinking? Yeah.
It could very well happen to them, but also it's like self-centered.
It is self-centered because just because it didn't bother me doesn't mean when I pass it to her, because I will pass it to her. It's a virus. It's not like I'll control it. No. If I have it and I'm here with you, I will pass it on to you. And so if I may not have reacted badly, but will she? I don't know. And by the way, the bad reaction that you get out of COVID is not COVID. It's your reaction to the COVID. It's your immune reaction. You can't predict how any individual is going to react. The swelling in the lungs, the congestion, the pneumonia, the death is because your body's reacting to it like somebody who's allergic to peanut butter. You saw Hitch? Anybody see Hitch? That's a great movie. So when you react to something, your immune system can literally kill you. So it's actually the release of cytokines that your body's trying to get rid of the virus causes a lot of the issues. So that's a big problem. And there's a lot of misinformation that the vaccine somehow causes infertility. There's a list of things that people say. I mean, they even said 5G causes COVID. I mean, there's all kinds of ridiculous statements put out there by liars and fools that people believe. And parents are scared because they're their babies, right? And they don't want to give people this vaccine because they believe it causes autism or it causes this or it causes that.
Wow.
That's just blatantly no real reason to be scared of the vaccine. Now, can a vaccine cause problems?
Yes.
Yes, it can. But so can eating peanut butter. So can eating a steak. So can eating a piece of lettuce. Chipotle has probably killed as many people or made as many people sick as the vaccine. All right. Have a good one. We'll continue this tomorrow. You will have a project to do on that webpage.